Good afternoon, everyone. We're just giving a few minutes for people to arrive. It's great to see such a big turnout for this webinar. Good afternoon. If you're just arriving, we're about to start. We're just allowing people to filter through the LGA lobby with its plush furnishings and delicious refreshments. So we'll be starting in a moment. We're going to start in a moment. Just wait, there's still people arriving through the lobby, so we're just giving it a moment. Good afternoon. We're going to make a start. There are people arriving, but we've got a tight schedule, so we're going to get going. Good afternoon. A very warm welcome. I'm Councillor Emily O'Brien. I'm the Vice Chair of the Local Government Association's Neighbourhoods Committee, and I'm also the Cabinet Member for Climate, Nature and Food Partnerships at Lewes District Council. I can see a couple of people saying they can't hear, so I was going to also say a big thank you to Emily Hackett from the LGA who's organised this event, and perhaps we can just double check the audio settings. If you can just reply in the chat if there's a problem. It might, hopefully it's just a couple of people. Oh yeah, most people can hear, so hopefully if those who can't, if you could leave and come back might fix the problem and make sure your usual things, volumes up. So thank you for joining us for this session on the role and value of local food partnerships. Whether you're completely new to this world of food systems and food partnerships, or whether you're already developing activity in your area, today's discussion's aimed at giving you some really practical insights into what effective partnerships look like and how councils can work across the whole food system. So that's to improve outcomes around health, food insecurity, to strengthen local economies, and to support more accessible, affordable and sustainable food for local communities. So food partnerships are now a key feature across the UK. There are more than 120 members of the Sustainable Food Places Network, with many more emerging. These partnerships bring together councils, voluntary and community organisations, businesses, health partners, local citizens to create a shared vision and coordinated action for transforming the food system in their place. So I'm going to hand over now to our brilliant panel for this afternoon. I'm just going to give you a quick intro to who they are. So we're going to hear initially from Helen Starr-Keddle. She's the Deputy Director at Food Matters and part of the Sustainable Food Places team. Helen's going to set the context, why food partnerships matter, what they can achieve, and how they're supporting places across the country. We're then going to hear from John Wilcox from Wakefield City Council and the Wakefield District Food Partnership, and he's going to share the experience of establishing a local food partnership. So that really crucial bit about where to start. At the opposite end, we're going to hear from Sam Dyer. She's CEO of the Cambridge Food Partnership. Cambridge is a gold sustainable food place, and Sam will reflect on what it takes to get there and what gold status means in practice and how that level of ambition drives local change. And then our final panelist will be Andy Gold, who's head of food strategy at the London Borough of Newham. So he's going to talk through Newham's food strategy, which includes a joined up approach that brings together public health, community wealth building and a just climate transition. So after our panelists, we're then going to have some Q&As from the audience, from you. So please do start thinking about your questions as we go along. And if you can please put your questions using the Q&A function, because that allows us to be able to sort them properly. And you can also upvote in the Q&A. So questions in the Q&A, and please upvote the ones that you most want to hear answered. We'll finish at 3:30, and the webinar will be recorded for those who couldn't join us today, but you will need to email Emily Hackett for that, and she's going to put her email in the chat at the end of the session. So, and in fact now it's in the chat if you want to get ahead. So thank you again for joining us. I can't wait for this conversation, subject completely dear to my heart, and I'm going to hand over to our first speaker now, Helen Starr-Keddle. Over to you, Helen.
Thanks, Emily. It would be really, whilst I'm just sorting out my slides, it would be really good if everyone could introduce themselves in the chat and say which area of the country they're coming from and whether they work for a council or a community and voluntary organisation. And I think we've got a little poll as well. Let me just get my slides. Can you see my slides, Emily? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, Helen, Ricky. Yes, so your slides are looking good, and if people just click on the poll, if it's come up for them, then that should mean that they can fully, see your slides.
Okay, lovely. Great, thanks Emily for the introduction, and I thought I'd say a little bit more about myself to introduce myself. So yes, my name's Helen Starr-Keddle. I work for Food Matters, where I'm Deputy Director, but I also have a few different hats. I sit on the Programme Management Board for Sustainable Food Places, but I also work for Brighton and Hove Food Partnership and have done for the last 14 years. And I've also previously worked on food policy at Brighton and Hove City Council. So I have an in-depth knowledge of both food, both from a food partnership perspective, but also from a council perspective. Great, so I shall start my thing. Food Matters, we're a small national charity has been going for over 20 years. Our vision is that healthy, sustainable, fair food is a reality for everybody every day. And our mission is to work with people and organisations to create a fairer, sustainable food system where everyone has a voice and access to good food. And in practice, that means that we provide support to both councils and to food partnerships by providing bespoke consultancy support and through the Sustainable Food Places programme. Before I go into depth about what a food partnership is or what Sustainable Food Places does, I just wanted to check about everyone's understanding of the current food system and why it needs to change and how food partnerships can help. So what is a food system? Well, this is the definition in the National Food Strategy. The food system is the combination of all the elements, natural and man-made, that combine to produce, process, market and sell the food we eat and the connections between them. Food shapes nearly every aspect of our lives, our health, our environment, our economy and our communities. It includes everything from how food is grown, transported and sold, to how it's eaten and what happens to it afterwards. It's also influenced by bigger pictures like poverty, climate change and public health. So what's wrong with our food system? So I was having this conversation with my dad the other day and he said, I don't know what's wrong with our food system. I can go to the supermarket and pick up whatever I want, whenever I want, which is obviously amazing. But unfortunately, for that to happen, it means lots of people haven't been paid a fair price along the way. The farmers haven't been paid a fair price, meaning that they're in financial trouble and a lot of them are shutting down. It means that the use of agricultural pesticides, fertilizers and things like that is reducing biodiversity and polluting nature. The current food system accounts for about 1/3 of all our carbon emissions, and about 10 million tonnes of food is wasted in the UK. Also, a lot of adults and children can't afford the food anyway. We have a huge amount of people of households in food insecurity, whilst obesity and diet-related ill health are prevalent in the UK, with over 60% of adults obese. Plus, there's many, many more issues, but I won't go on about that. So one of the biggest food-related challenges, like food insecurity, poor nutrition and unsustainable production, can't be solved by one organisation or sector alone. For example, food poverty is tied to the economy, welfare and social care, and climate change calls for shifts in food production, consumption and waste. And public health is influenced by food access, affordability advertising and skills. So that's why we need joined up working. We need to bring people together from across the sectors to tackle root causes, not just symptoms. What's often missing is a local space where people can come together from those different sectors and they can share insight and align their efforts. And that's where local food partnerships come in. So what is a food partnership? Well, I think Emily mentioned before, but it's typically an alliance of organisations and individuals working together to improve their food system. The partnerships are very much place-based and they reflect the unique context, needs and priorities of their local communities. So they typically include stakeholders from local authorities, like people in the public health teams, community and voluntary organisations, local food businesses and producers, academic and education institutions. They are often hosted by the council, but they can also be hosted by an independent charity or community organisation, and there's advantages and disadvantages of both models. So what do they actually do? So food partnerships are more than just talking shops. They are action orientated. The core activities include co-developing local food strategies and action plans to set a shared vision in their local area. They coordinate activity across sectors, connecting stakeholders and also reducing duplication. They deliver programs and projects from food access to growing projects to education and climate action. They also influence policy and decision making and public attitudes, and they instigate new collaborations by sharing best practice and fostering innovation, and they amplify the good work that's happening locally. So what impact do food partnerships make? Well, my colleagues will delve a little bit more into the practical impact as we go through the different presentations today. But each different food partnership is multi-partnered and very varied. So each food partnership will be having different impact in different areas across the food system. But it could be things like enabling children to eat healthy and sustainable food in schools, or it could be by multi-partner working. They help families who present at food banks to get all the benefits that they need, or it could be helping local farmers connect to local buyers in their region, or it could be changing a procurement contract so that institutions in the region buy more local sustainable food and help the local economy. We've recorded over 1,200 impacts that food partnerships make just from 50 food partnerships. So there's much more activity happening around the country. So Sustainable Food Places, well, we are the partnership programme supporting the cities, towns and regions across the UK to make healthy and sustainable food a defining characteristic of where people live. We're a partnership between Food Matters, the Soil Association, Sustain, the Alliance of Food and Farming, Nourish Scotland and Food Sense Wales. Practically, that means that we help each of those areas establish a cross-sector food partnership, develop a vision, strategy and action plan, work together to realise that vision through concerted and coordinated action across a wide range of issues. So our network, we're now in over 120 places across the UK. So there's a food partnership in each of those areas. They cover geographies from towns and boroughs to major cities and counties. So quite a mix of urban and rural. Food partnerships are first and foremost about the place. So no two food partnerships are the same. And Sustainable Food Places just provides the advice, toolkits and a framework for a process for each place to determine what happens in their area and what matters in their area. So what makes us work as a network is that our framework's adaptable and the principles and the broad SFP themes bind us as a network, but are flexible enough for each individual place to find its own shape and pace, and listen to the needs of the local communities to shape their agenda. So we have a six-pronged approach. We cover 6 key issues. First one is food governance and strategy. So that's taking a sustainable, strategic and collaborative approach. Healthy, affordable food for all. So that's tackling food poverty, diet-related ill health and access. Transforming catering and procurement and revitalising local food supply chains. Good food movement, building public awareness and active food citizenship. Creating a vibrant, prosperous and diverse sustainable food economy, and Food for the Planet, which is tackling the climate and nature emergency through sustainable food and farming and an end to food waste. So if you're thinking about starting a food partnership in your area, what support can you get? So through Food Matters, we offer bespoke consultancy support to councils and fledgling food partnerships for a fee. We specialise in using our participatory approach and process to ensure that we're listening to and taking into consideration the voices of local people in developing any strategies and plans. We can provide mentoring for teams to work through what will work best in your area, and we can help with mapping out and scoping what's already happening. We can provide facilitation of meetings and events, such as facilitating a food summit, bringing together key stakeholders to collectively plan. And we can help with developing strategies, plans, or reports, whatever's kind of needed in the area. Sustainable Food Places has lots of resources and help, so I'm sure my colleagues will link in the chat to where you can go there. There's a fantastic website which has downloadable toolkit and resources to help you work through processes to develop your food partnership. There's even a new counties guide to help rural areas with aspects that matter to those areas. You can become a member of Sustainable Food Places once you've got a food partnership and you've been operating for 6 months. And when you are a member, you can access events and peer-to-peer support and help shape our national campaigns. My colleagues are organising a new member drop-in, which is on the 10th of February at 2 p.m. And again, I think that information will get put in the chat. So if you want to sign up to that, that'd be really useful. And there's information about, we've got membership application dates. Again, we'll put them in the chat. Sustainable Food Places has an award system where you can work through bronze, silver and gold. And those awards recognise and celebrate the success of places across the UK who take a holistic and systems approach to sustainable and healthy food. So they provide benchmarking for your area and a real incentive to progress this work as a partnership. There's also Good Food Local. Good Food Local is a benchmarking tool specifically for councils, coordinated by Sustain. It's currently been piloted in London and the North West, but it's being rolled out to the whole of the UK. So I think, again, we can link to that in the chat. And I think Andy's going to talk a little bit later about how Good Food Local and the Sustainable Food Places Awards have sort of worked together and helped the council to sort of have a benchmark. So what is the incentive for a council to do this? Well,
Helen, just to let you know, give you your 2-minute warning.
Oh, okay, yeah.
To know. Thank you.
So food is everywhere in the council, and work on food systems can help address lots of local authority priorities. It can also be used as a tool to engage people and organisations. Local authorities themselves are essential in driving food partnerships, so they're a really important part of this. Benefits for councils can include things like improved public health, which is probably the most obvious one, around promoting healthier diets and lifestyles. But it can also help improve the local economy by strengthening local supply chains. You can also have cost savings, so you can reduce long-term healthcare costs through preventative measures, improve economic growth, provide waste reduction, for example, and it also enhances community resilience. So a strengthened local food system will better withstand crises, like as we saw, for instance, with COVID. So my top tips for starting out is to get senior buy-in, if at all possible, because I think that really, really helps in your local area. And really look, listen and learn about your local context. So, what's the vehicle for making food visible? What's already happening? What structures already exist? And how much interest is there in change? And find the open door and start there. Also talk to other food partnerships. 120 organisations or people have done this already in the country, so you can find them through the SFP website. So it's really, really worth reaching out. You don't need to do this on your own. There's lots of advice and help out there. Okay, I'll leave it there, Emily. Thank you.
Fabulous precision timing. Thank you so much. What a great overview, Helen. Really, that's really appreciated. And there's some, as you said, there's some links in the chat to resources. There's a lot of interest in, so, how do I get some support? How do I find out more? So do look in the chat for that. And just a reminder to people, if you've got any questions for Helen or for any of the other speakers, please put them in the Q&A and we'll come to those at the end. So thank you. Oh, and there was one question about slides. Yes, the slides will be shared after the meeting. So we're going to turn next to John Wilcox from Wakefield City Council and the Wakefield District Food Partnership, and he's going to share the experience of establishing a local food partnership. So where to start? Over to you, John.
Thank you very much. Hopefully my slides should appear in a moment. If you can let me know when they arrive.
I can see they're loading on their way. Yep, can see perfectly now. Thank you.
Lovely. So my name is John Wilcox and I am a founding member of the Wakefield District Good Food Partnership, but also a public health officer at Wakefield Council. And this presentation I'm going to do is very much from a council officer perspective and the experiences of a council officer and a council local authority trying to establish a food partnership. So if we look first at not so much where it started, but why it started in Wakefield. And quite simply, my manager asked myself and a colleague for 5 minutes where she said to us, I've been talking to the cabinet member and we'd really like you to start to look at a food partnership, which left us with lots of questions, me and my colleague, because the main one was, why me? Because my background is planning and health. So I can tell you all about local development strategies, spatial plans, even hot food takeaway zones, but very little about developing a food partnership. And my colleague Karen, who's couldn't be here today, but is a state registered dietitian. So she's, as she said, I know all about proteins, carbohydrates, amino acids, but setting up a food partnership, quite a lot of questions. So we had lots and lots of questions. So what did we do when we have questions? We looked for answers, and we basically looked everywhere. We tried to get answers from as many different places as possible. So we looked at, as Helen mentioned, established food partnerships. Also other partnerships, such as our local physical activity partnership was very useful about how to set up a partnership. Talked to other council officers, volunteers, visited networks, went to webinars like this, just really tried a whole host of different things just to get as much information as possible. And really used that to set us going. And this presentation is really looking at how we synthesized all the advice we got and what we did with that advice to really help us set up a food partnership. So I have to say, most of the information in this presentation is not mine. It's stolen or borrowed from lots of generous other food partnerships and other council colleagues who've all given us lots of advice. And that's one thing I would definitely say, is that I've been absolutely stunned by the generosity of everybody involved in the food system networking and food partnerships, and how willing to help they are and how willing to support. So as I said, most of the advice in this presentation is borrowed from other people, apart from this one slide, which is the advice from us, which is basically, if we could give one piece of advice when setting up a food partnership, it is talk to as many people as possible. And when you're looking at people, it's trying to get the most variety of groups you can and talk to virtually anyone you think might be of interest. When we first started, we did find that food matters, and actually paying for some support for food matters was really helpful, as was the Sustainable Food Places website and linking Sustainable Places. If you only had one starting point, I say those two make excellent starting points. What we would say when you're talking to people, a piece of advice would be, don't just look for successful food partnerships and talk about successes. We had some very frank conversations with some food partnerships that were, or failing is probably a wrong word, but could do better. And they were really frank and helpful discussions about what not to do. Really helpful, telling us, you know, try not to do this, try not to do that. And it was really, really helpful to talk to people who were, we learned a lot from successful food partnerships and successful officers, but actually had a lot more learning and a lot better discussions with the groups and partnerships who weren't working so well, actually helping us find out what to do. And the other thing that we want to do was think beyond the food system. So we did talk to other partnerships like physical activity and cycling partnerships who offered lots of advice about how to engage with people and get people together. The other thing I would say as advice is also keep asking questions. Don't just stop when you're setting out. We are getting advice all the time. So what did we do next based on all this evidence, all this advice we got, and did it work? Well, the first thing we did was the advice we got key was find out what your local food system wants. People might not want a food partnership. So we actually held a food summit. This was an online only event. We asked Food Matters to be an independent facilitator because one of the advice we got was don't make it a council event. If you make it a council event, it becomes a council project and people will expect the council to lead and do everything. And a true partnership is about everybody's taking responsibility. We had an open invite because we wanted to make it as inclusive as possible, as that advice said, and we only had a few speakers. The idea was to make it about collecting people's views. It was about asking people what they wanted rather than telling people what we were going to do. And all those were based on bits of advice. And what I would say is all those pieces of advice were excellent and we would do them again, apart from the online only event, which was more from a COVID point of view. In-person events we've found are far better in actually getting people to speak to each other. The outcomes we got from the food summit were that we needed a local food partnership. All the stakeholders thought that was a good idea, and they identified 5 key priorities, which I'll look at later. So the next steps we then did was based on advice, which was as soon as you've had your summit and found out what people want, don't stop, move on and keep momentum going and get a meeting as soon as possible so that people can act while they're still enthusiastic. So we had an open meeting straight after the food partnership, about a week afterwards, and we got lots of stakeholders together. Again, both good ideas. We hit some problems where some of the people who attended probably maybe had less than positive intentions. So there were some questions about whether an open invite was the best way to go, but I think we would have probably done the same again because we want to be as inclusive as possible. That meeting resulted in the setting up of a task and finish group, which brought lots of varied stakeholders together, council officers, voluntary sector organisations, NHS, trading standards, just individuals who were interested, who wanted to actually then look at how we actually set up a food partnership and going with that target. So that group then, again, did more fact finding, spoke to more people, more partnerships, started to develop a food charter. So we had a shared vision about what we wanted to achieve, and also started to develop an action plan so we could actually see what we wanted to achieve. We set ourselves a target of trying to get the food partnership launched by July 2024. So we gave ourselves 8 months to actually set up this food partnership. Spoiler, we didn't actually achieve it in that time scale. We only missed it by a few months, but what I would say is setting a hard aim like that would probably something we wouldn't do again. All the other things we would do, but setting a hard aim is probably the target of we're going to achieve a food partnership by this date is not something we'd do again. It just almost unrealistic expectations on people. So as a result of that, in autumn 2024, we launched our food partnership with a second food summit. This time in person, and the in-person event was so much more positive and better than the online event. It was absolutely really enthusiastic. It was really good at that event that we got a speaker from another food partnership, Anna from Food Futures in Lancaster, who came and really inspired everyone because they could see that it wasn't all pie in the sky. They could see what another food partnership was actually achieving, and it gave a real life example. We then had local showcases and celebrated all the success of the development group to date before launching the partnership, getting people's views on how they wanted to progress and giving people a networking opportunity. So as that was basically the first steps of how we actually formed a food partnership. However, the key thing we wanted to look at is we did all that based on the advice we were given. What was the best advice we were given with hindsight? Having gone through the process of setting up a food partnership, what were the best pieces of advice we were given? And we've selected 3 things. The first is probably the most important and I think if you do talk to anybody about setting up a food partnership, this is probably the thing they will say to you over and over again, and you'll be sick of hearing, but it is worth knowing, is don't rush, don't force things. Things will be ready when they're ready. And especially from a local authority point of view, sometimes there are external pressures from managers and cabinet members to get results and move things forward quicker than they are. The fact is, as one of our members said, building relationships and building a partnership takes time. People need time to get to know each other, build consensus, and also fall out and make up again and work out how they're working together and build a shared vision. And this all takes time. So one of the things is you can't do everything at once. So that thing of actually taking a breath and actually moving at the pace that your partnership is able to move and not rushing or forcing things. You've got a far better chance, someone said to us in one of our meetings, of maintaining people's enthusiasm than maintaining and forcing momentum. And enthusiasm is much more important. So that's the first thing I would say. Don't rush things, take your time. The second piece of advice we got was about balance. And especially this is from a local authority officer point of view. You need to be clear on your roles and appreciate, as a local authority officer or a local authority, you have many different roles. You have to balance between being a facilitator and supporting and keeping the process going and maybe providing funding, and also being a stakeholder. And it's that thing of balancing supporting without actually becoming a leader. The fact is, one piece of advice we got was, if you make something a council project, or the council leads something, it becomes a council project and people expect the council to deliver it. Well, if you set it up as a partnership, making it clear that it's a joint responsibility of everyone involved in that partnership, then that's the key thing. It's about getting people to work together. And as a council officer, you may need to actually sometimes deal with conflicting priorities. That the food partnership might have certain priorities that sometimes don't always agree with your priority as a council officer. For example, from my public health point of view, one of them, Karen, obviously it leads on food and nutrition. However, as a partnership, their priority for start was sustainability, and there was some tension between her having to put her food and nutrition almost on the back burner to actually try and support the partnership around sustainability. The third and final piece of advice we got was stay positive. And I can testify the early tasks of forming a food partnership can be very, very, very dry and boring. Writing constitutions, applying for funding, all the sort of things that can be dry. And I think you need to accept that people are going to drop out. Some people are not going to see with you to the end, and that's fine. They may, part of the process of them discovering that a food partnership or being involved in a food partnership is not for them, or as the goals of the food partnership establish, it might not be for them. And the key thing we got told, and it's something that I think is another absolutely essential thing, is celebrate every success. Setting up a food partnership is a bumpy ride. You will guarantee it is lots of setbacks and but also lots of successes. So you need to celebrate every small step. We, at our first birthday party we had a couple of months ago for our food partnership, we were thinking, well, what are we going to celebrate? We haven't achieved much. And then as a management committee, we made a list. It shocked everyone. There were loads of things we'd done, webinars and set up our own website, joint sustainable food places. So it's really important to celebrate every success. But if there's one final piece of advice I would give, and that's basically talk to as many people as possible, because I was just been so shocked with how generous people would be with their time. So my final slide is just a thank you to you all for listening, but also a thank you to the nameless, and must be tens and tens of people and organisations who've provided help to the Wakefield Food Partnership and helped the advice that we've hopefully shared in this presentation, because without their help, we wouldn't have got where we are today and we wouldn't have established a food partnership.
Amazing. Thank you so much, John. That's a brilliant sort of step-by-step journey. Fabulous to get that real sense of how to do things, and also your reflections on the generosity of other food partnerships and your local partners as well. And it's great to see such a range of people here from different organisations. If you've arrived late, do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And I can see some people are actually making some of those links with their own areas, which is just showing the power of partnership. So thank you for that. We're going to move now to Sam Dyer, from the CEO of Cambridge Food Partnership, who's Cambridge is a kind of leading food partnership in the UK. They have gold sustainable food place status, and she's going to tell us how they did it and what it means. Thanks, Sam.
Okay, can you see my slides?
Your slides are doing beautifully, thank you.
Fabulous, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Sam Dyer, and I'm from Cambridge Sustainable Food in Cambridge. And I'd like to share a little bit about Cambridge's journey as a Sustainable Food Places Partnership, what the City Council, Cambridge City Council's involvement and funding have made possible, and what I think local authorities can take from our Gold programme and strong partnership with our local authority. Cambridge's Food Partnership started its life as a volunteer-led group, so hosted outside of a local authority. I think, as Helen pointed out, there's many different varieties. We were a volunteer-led group and went on to be hosted by a community interest company. The relationship with our local authority has been built over 12 years, so it takes that long to get, I think, to a point where you're ready for gold. 10 years, I think, is the average. So let me see the next slide. I'll start with the why. Food is sometimes treated as a community add-on or as an add-on, and it's often quite cross-sectorial. But I think for local government, food can be a practical route to delivering on priorities that sit across departments. Community development, food builds participation, volunteering, skills, social connection and trusted neighbourhood spaces. Public health and inequalities, food insecurity and diet-related ill health drive demand on services and widen health gaps. Planning and placemaking, the built environment shapes access to affordable food, community infrastructure and the ability to grow and share food locally. Climate and biodiversity. Food is a significant lever for emissions reduction and waste prevention, as well as behaviour change that residents can actually feel in daily life. And then resilience and emergency planning. Food is also key and core to local resilience. When there's a shock, whether that's a pandemic, as we saw in COVID, or extreme weather, supply disruption, or a sudden spike in need, councils are expected to coordinate a response. Strong local food partnerships give ready-made capability, and it's the kind of infrastructure you cannot build overnight, but you can strengthen and advance, so your emergency response is faster and more coordinated. So I think when we talk about food, we're really talking about prevention, resilience, and healthy neighbourhoods. Cambridge Sustainable Food exists to make healthy, sustainable food available for everyone and to advocate for policies and practice that create a fair, resilient local food system. And we do that by convening partners across the system, from community groups to university, to businesses and the local authority. In Cambridge, we coordinate the Cambridge Food Partnership. And we like to think of this as a distributed network rather than a rigid steering group type of model, which can often run into problems of same faces, meetings for no purpose, etc. But once we started to think about it as a living system or a living organism, then somehow that structure mattered, because it made systems working practical, and allowed for the ebbs and flows of people's energies, involvement, time, that type of thing. Oh, sorry, go back. Cambridge achieved silver in 2021, but we knew we needed to go further to tackle food justice and climate in a more joined up way. So in 2022, we launched an action plan and Gold Food Cambridge, and we treated the programme as a citywide movement rather than awards application. We ran events, Gold Food challenges, public-facing campaigns that helped residents and institutions participate in the change, not just to hear about it. As a partnership, we also set two clear areas of excellence. One was food justice and one was climate and biodiversity. The focus helped us line up the work of two different teams and partners behind shared outcomes. These areas also aligned and were symbiotic with key City Council strategies and action plans. Goal didn't happen without local government leadership. And in our goal brochure, Cambridge City Council recognises CSF and as an anchor organisation helping connect communities, schools, charities, food banks, public sector partners and council leadership, and is clear about the value of partnership working to improve healthy access to sustainable food. From my perspective, the City Council's involvement shows up in 4 practical ways. So convening and the, sorry, I keep clicking. Council backing, convening and legitimacy. Council backing always makes it easier to align partners and take a citywide approach. It lends legitimacy and unlocks doors and funding. It embeds food in core strategies. Food is referenced in our City Council's anti-poverty, climate and biodiversity work, which makes it easier for officers across departments to justify action on food. Planning is a long-term lever. The Council's approach includes encouraging food growing in new developments, and we work with officers on a supplementary planning guidance for food in new developments. And we have worked with developers on commitments around sustainable food and growing pre-planning application. I do believe planning is one of the biggest prevention tools councils hold. There's also capacity building for practical delivery through your voluntary and community sector. In Cambridge, and here's an example, in Cambridge holiday hunger provision, what was previously delivered directly by the City Council is now led by the voluntary and community sector, with the City Council playing a crucial role in enabling that through funding, officer support and access to council community centres at venues. And you can, some of the figures on that is that 52 events over last year, providing 3,000 meals. So what has it really, what is the impact of that partnership working had? Here are some key figures in terms of access to food, but also surplus diverted from landfill, the amount of meals equivalent, the amount of volunteer hours that have been put in, and their economic value. And just a little bit about this co-farm is a fantastic example. Community farm directly donated over 4 tons of food during the pandemic. So some of the useful sustainable food places tools that we've used along the way, which are provided, I believe, on the Sustain website, but there's a health check, so you can really judge where you are as a city, which allows for prioritisation across departments. There is a ready tool out there developed by Food Matters, which is very much around looking through the lens of asking who's benefiting from your services, who is missing from the partnership, and whether your approach is reducing inequalities. And on the award system that was mentioned earlier, it's helpful as it creates a clear improvement pathway. It gives councils, partners and others a recognised set of themes and expectations, and provides an external deadline that can focus effort and unlock internal buy-in. So I'm coming to the end, Emily. Hopefully I'm not done overrunning too much. I've got 3 top tips for local authorities on partnerships and systems working. One is make food a whole council, not a single team project. If it only sits with one service, it stays small. The step change comes when public health, communities, climate, planning and procurement share a plan and a language. Invest in the partnership's function, not just activities. So projects do come and go, but systems working needs coordination, convening and an anchor. Even modest backbone capacity out in the community makes a difference between fragmented work and a coherent system. And use your strongest long-term levers, planning and procurement. Set expectations for food environments and developments. protect and create community food spaces, and use council catering and contracts to model healthier, more sustainable food. So Cambridge's Gold Journey shows what can happen when an anchor organisation and local authority treat food as a shared system. It becomes a route to prevention, climate delivery, community resilience and healthy neighbourhoods. Thank you. I'd love to speak to any councils here for considering this pathway. Thanks, Emily.
Amazing. Thank you, Sam. Fabulous to hear about Cambridge's journey and just a taster of the amazing work you've done. I can see some really interesting questions coming through in the Q&A. Do have a look at them, upvote any that you particularly want answered so that we know to ask them first after our final speaker has spoken, and add your own questions as well. But I'm going to hand over now to our final speaker before we do our panel Q&A. That's Andy Gold. He's the head of food strategy at the London Borough of Newham, and which has a very exciting approach, a very exciting food strategy. Over to you, Andy.
Hello, can you see my slides? Have they shared effectively?
Not yet. No, I can see you. Oh, I think they're coming though.
How are we doing?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can see the slides. If you could just pop them on full screen.
Yeah, let's do that. There we go. How are we doing?
Absolutely perfect. Thank you.
Right, fantastic. Well, lovely to be here. I am Andy Gold, the head of food strategy. It's fantastic hearing John speak and talk about hosting. And I'm going to talk to you about the London Borough of Newham and our work here. The first thing to say about me is I'm in a public health team that is quite large in Newham, and I sit in a role that is literally known as being the community public health manager of food systems, and that's obviously quite significant and unusual. And I'm going to talk to you about Newham and echo something that John said and that Cambridge has talked to us about. No two food partnerships are the same. Our actual sustainable food places in the network is a sustainable food Newham. We're more commonly recognised locally through the particular work of a part of that partnership, which is the Newham Food Alliance. Newham, we are in East London, and beyond our IMD data and the things that you might see here, a really important thing to know is that we're at the wedge of Kent and Essex, and we have routes that run all over the world. And Newham is a very, very food forward place. Once you get past the data and spend some time on the ground, there is a lot going on and always has been. Food is a really big part of the mandate. The second important thing to know about Newham is since 2018, we have had a very, very strong mandate from the administration on food. It was an administration that came in building on previous work on food that had been very strong. We had a food strategy from 2006 onwards, and you might know that Newham is the home of universal school meals. We were the longest standing universal school meals scheme, and that's a really big thing locally and shaping perhaps how we feel about ourselves as a place. That we've done universal school meals for a very, very long time, and a lot of people now have grown up with it and become parents out of that system even. We had an administration that recognised the challenge and the opportunity around health and climate when it comes to food. A third of climate emissions and half of all preventable years lost to ill health and early death, and the opportunity that the food we needed for a planet was the same as people. So we weren't going searching with a food partnership or knocking on the council's door looking for support and a mandate. It was the other way around. As a council, we were looking to take action, and we knew that there was a lot of great work out there. As a partnership, as a council, being a partner in that partnership, we get our mandate from these three places. And we made a really conscious decision early on in 2019 that we weren't going to write a standalone food strategy. We were going to do our council part by getting what the young people like to tell me is main strategy energy, and get our ambitions around food in those main council policies and make it a commitment as to how we were going to work, and then to take it from there. So all these slides are shared, but something that's really significant in our Just Transition Plan, which was the first local government Just Transition Plan on climate in the UK, sustainably is one of the 6 futures. And that's a really great example of how food is embedded in the council. And then when we went out to work as a partnership, we didn't have to go searching for that mandate. As a public health team in Newham, we do all of those things that you'd expect of a public health team, but we also, a little bit unusually, do oversee some big things operationally and creatively within council delivery. And that's, again, different. And that just comes from the type of public health team we are set up to be. So when it comes to our partnership and that relationship, we are working from that reality. And it's not something we want to change because it's been very, very effective locally. In terms of investing and being a partner in our food partnership, we are judged in all the ways you might imagine. And we are always looking at that work and representing that work as a partnership. In terms of pounds in residents' pockets, in terms of pressure taken off council services and savings to budgets, and those medium or long-term health benefits that are obviously crucial to as a public health team, leading on that work and justifying the investment we put into our partnership. You've heard Good Food Local mentioned. Sometimes it's thought that Good Food Local and sustainable food places are almost in competition. They're not. Your partnership is how you get things done. And Good Food Local is a great way as a council to ask, are we putting our shoulders to the wheel? Are we being the engine when we need to be? Or are we carrying the bags and making the tea in our partnership in terms of getting things done? Newham, it's a really good moment to think about when we first realised we were a partnership, because we became a partnership before we became a sustainable food place or a sustainable food partnership in the sustain national network sense of the world. In COVID, we realised pretty early on that we were going to need to do something big to make it work locally. And we realised very early on, as a group of about 40 voluntary community and faith sector partners and the council, who came together and said, we're going to need to work together here. We realised that as well as doing something big on food, in terms of making direct food support to residents work, we needed to do something that was strategic. And we got together as a group of partners in a room and we did a massive co-production session where we wrote a PowerPoint saying, this is how we need to work. And the first thing we recognised is that whatever we did on food, whatever we did on food security work, needed to always be directing people back towards their statutory entitlement and not instead of. It's become known over time. Very early on, we got by accident the name the Newham Food Alliance. And very early on, we realised that everything had to be about wraparound. And it's more recently been known as the first we break bread approach. There's a lot of faith in Newham, and one of our faith leaders said, this is in every religious text what we're doing here. First you break bread, you sit down, and then from there, from a food security perspective, from a welfare perspective, you are able to work on your challenges. We have worked really hard to then bring that approach across into other areas, on holiday activities and food, on community hot meals. We have worked to design how we work as a council, as a disperser of funds, co-producing with our partners, so that when we go out to put those grants out into the community, they are likely to be picked up by local food partners, community organisations already doing great food. So on holiday activities and food, and on our community hot meals programme, which grew out of our Warm Havens work, we've got a really good track record of getting that money in the hands of local partners with great food work going on and sort of supercharging things, creating synergy. So we realised then that we were a food partnership, and we worked hard to get inside the Sustainable Food Places Network, because the thing that we realised is to synergise the great work that was already happening, we needed to make friends, and we needed to get out there in places where we could beg, borrow, and just steal the best ideas and do more with it. From there, we've been able to build some great work in schools on food growing, and we're now taking that work out into other places. And then off that, we have really leaned into sort of other micro partnerships within the partnership. And we're now up to 14 hero retailers in work on good food retail. Our longest standing bit of work on food in schools. We've built on our universal meal scheme since 2020 to every year work with our schools as, again, a micro partnership within that work to make sure that we are attaching to the funding for universal school meals in Newham grant conditions and grant principles that are built around a theory of change, and that are built around ensuring that that money locally on school meals is doing so much more within our school community, within our education partnerships, than just delivering a meal. That it is heavily focused on ensuring that we are getting whole school approaches, and we are getting a community of schools within Newham that are doing everything they can on food and on our food system. And within that, we've got obviously a focus on the terms and conditions, the wages that are paid to people who work within our food system, but also on the fact that schools are huge green spaces and huge opportunities for food growing within our community. There's a lot to get through. These slides will be shared. As a result, And as a result of those schools as partners, we have maintained a local authority catering service in Newham. And that's a really, really huge thing. There's only 4 left in London, but it's a great deliverer of upward pressure in our school food market. We obviously don't serve all of the schools in Newham, but again, that collective will to try and create as schools and council a set of market conditions where you cannot just buy a school meal at the lowest price, and that's not a desirable thing to do. That money is working hard locally as what we call community wealth building. We've put ourselves in a position to maintain an option for schools that continues to be valued, and has allowed us to do some fantastic work on things like circular food purchasing and being a founder signature of that, and is able to do some work on reducing our per plate carbon of our school meals. And that all comes back to that idea of having a mandate, then having a group of partners, and then turning that mandate and that partnership into something tangible. We have similar types of work now going on in 0 to 5 settings and in our home care settings. If you're a council looking for an area where you could make a real difference on food, I think there is a huge opportunity to be a partner with all of your settings that deliver adult social care and support to older residents. I think it's a huge area where we have a chance to learn from what we've started to do nationally on school food and to build on that. We're very, very big on external funding and partnerships outside the borough. And again, because of that mandate, we're in a position to be a campaigning council, and so a campaigning food partnership. And it's very easy usually for us to stand shoulder to shoulder with voluntary community and faith sector, and that's probably demonstrated really well on something like Welcome Newham and our approach to food in hotels where we've had obviously refugees, migrants and asylum seekers being settled in the borough. All the work, everything we do as a partnership, everything we do as a council is focused on strategic high-level change. Can we use our voice as a partnership? Can we draw in more partners to be able to affect whole systems change? We do a lot of work as a partnership, whatever area of food we are working on and whatever we're doing as a council as host, to try and get the partners in the room and get everybody on a map, because that drives the type of thing that John was talking about in Wakefield of accountability. You're on the map, you have a role to play, and that's been a really, really big feature in making progress across a range of areas. There's other work in Newham that we don't always think about as being within the partnership, but it always makes a difference having a wide coalition of partners speaking up. So much of life happens in those informal settings where we don't realise we're advocating for change. We're just speaking about the things that we care about. And in Newham, getting a healthier food advertising policy across the line, getting our local plan in the right place, having some really forward-thinking work on planning, all of that has been driven by essentially a cacophony of voices all asking for the same thing. And as a council, as a host, the key thing that we have really focused on is sometimes, yes, there is a role for us to lead, but so often what we need to do is just be able to get people in the room, provide the space, make the tea, carry the bags, and just provide synergy to all of that fantastic energy that is out there. If I was asked to say one thing to a council that maybe has a mandate but doesn't know where to begin, so much more is going on out there than you probably realise. And the first thing is get on your bike. I've been working with Newham for 10 years and for Newham for 6 years. And that experience of getting out on my bike and finding out what was out there was my first job with the council. And the realisation that if we could just strap some rockets to this, we weren't going to have to pilot it. We just needed to support and grow. And yeah, I think as a starting point, and the second thing I would say is use the Sustainable Food Places Network. If you're in London, use Good Food London. Use Good Food Local to get out there and make friends, and you will need very few original ideas. Your partnership can be driven by the help of friends and the fantastic ideas and work that are out there to lean into.
Amazing. Thank you, Andy. That's brilliant and perfectly timed as well. You covered a lot of material in there, and I know one of the questions in the chat initially was, are the slides going to be shared? And yes, they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. And this is also an opportunity for you to ask Andy, who's done such an amazing kind of whistle-stop tour around, you know, what his food partnership, some of the activity as well as, you know, the kind of how to do it stuff. So do feel free to ask more. So if all of the panelists wouldn't mind putting their cameras on now, we're going to move into the Q&A. So a big thank you, Andy. It was a fabulous way to end our formal presentation bit. So what I'm going to do is put some questions to you, and please do, if you're in the audience here, do have a look at the questions you most want to hear, because I am also being steered by the ones which are upvoted as well as adding your own. So there's quite a lot of interest in this question from Laura Campbell, which is a lot of the examples shared work well in more urban or connected areas. In large dispersed rural districts with limited transport links, access and engagement can look very different. Are there any models or adaptations you've seen that work well in geographically spread communities? So there's a question there about different places. I'm going to do these in threes. Related to that is Yotsna Laney's question. Apologies, I probably mispronounced that. Do sustainable food places have to be done at county level, or can it be done at district level in the current two-tier system? And then, not completely related, but I think picking up this theme that Andy pulled out so well, that, you know, no two food places are the same. So I think it does relate, because the answer to this question will be very different, I think, in more rural and more urban areas. And Andrew Mellon has asked, has anyone been successful in building up local commercial small-scale food production? If so, what were the key interventions / enablers? So 3 questions there. Do you want to put your hand up, either your yellow hand or your actual hand, if you're willing to answer one or more of those? Okay, I'm going to come to Helen first.
Great, thanks, Emily. Yes, so the question around like geographic spread and like what different models work. Well, there's 2 different questions there, but I think I will share the link to the county's toolkit in the chat, because it's a really useful resource to think about how local food partnerships work at different areas. Because originally, when sustainable food places first set up, it was sustainable food cities, and then suddenly we ended up moving into much more geographically diverse areas. So lots of those kind of issues came up, and in that toolkit there's quite a lot of case studies of places that have done it on that kind of more dispersed area. So I think that's a really, really useful place to start. And no, in terms of like what kind of level they can be done at, I think the thing is, it's just really what makes sense in your area, because really people have a perception of where they live and like how far it spreads out. So someone might be a resident of a local community, and actually it doesn't make sense for it to form into a bigger community, because they have their areas where that they kind of, you know, they sort of what they believe it to be. So I think the first thing to do is really kind of research and talk to local people about how they feel about their local area. And you can certainly have, so for example, in East Sussex, there's different food partnerships in each of the different district areas, but they come together on the county level. So they have a network that meets together on the county level of all the different district food partnerships. And I know in other areas, certainly, you know, if you were living in a particular town, you'd be like, well, you know, another town quite near you, you'd be like, that's a totally different area for me. So I think it's really important to do the research about your local area to find what would work in your area. And also nowadays, obviously, we've got the mayoral regions happening, so it might as well be something that it could also be something that happens on a regional level. We haven't that's something to TBC anyway. I'll pass over to Andy.
Thank you. I think Sam put her hand up next, but she did it like that. So in the interest of fairness, I'll go to Sam and then Andy. Thank you.
Won't be very long. I was just going to mention that Cambridge is a district council, and it has, working at that level is, I mean, I think Helen's covered a lot of it, but it's about the granularity, I think, and the level of detail for us. Now, obviously, at that sort of district level, a lot of the times hands are tied, budgets are small, influence is small, public health is not particularly, that sits at the county level, as do schools. So our work hasn't always focused on those areas, but we have worked. It's sort of, I guess, it's like at depth rather than breadth, in a lot of ways.
Great, thank you. And Andy.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is wherever you operate, and I'm getting a ringside seat because I live on the edge of Enfield, where it just runs across into Hertfordshire, and I'm watching Hertfordshire do some interesting work, or people in Hertfordshire do that now. Wherever you work, you're going to find with voluntary community and faith sector organisations, the challenge is the same. You're going to need Zoom, and you're going to be meeting in those bits of the day when you can make it work. So actually, it doesn't matter whether you're the size of Scotland or the size of Newham. Actually, the things that will enable you to meet and work together. And we will be a little bit envious of your green spaces and food growing if you're out there in a bigger, wider space. And the challenges of every town or city within your place will be the same. You will have for your geographical area, your parish networks, people organising based on, a sort of a Burgess model of people around them. And it will not matter. The fundamentals will be the same: how to organise funding, how to raise awareness, how to get, those other strategic partners alerted to the opportunity that your energy and activism and desire to make a change is creating.
Amazing, thanks. John, did you want to come in, or should we? There's lots of questions, so happy to move on. You're welcome to comment if you like.
Just to say one thing is that in Wakefield, we're a district as well. So Wakefield, although it's a city, it's basically one of 5 medium-sized towns. And it's not so much distance that's our issue. It's the fact that each town has its own identity, and how we actually build that Wakefield district food partnership without fragmenting, because I think we quickly realised that having 5 or 6 small food partnerships would just be too fragmented. But it's how we actually spending lots of time, I said building relationships, but building relationships between the different areas, so that people from different food partnerships and different organisations, different areas, see themselves on the same side rather than competing. And that's been one of our big challenges.
Great, thank you. So different answers for different places, I think, is the theme coming through there. And I should say Lewis District Food Partnership, which I sit on as the lead councillor, we're part of East Sussex County Council. I actually think it's quite helpful having a food partnership in places that are 2-tier, because it can be a place for some of those gaps to be addressed around that, and ever more important as many of us go through local government reorganisation as well, I think. So I'm going to ask some really practical questions now, because then I think there was a lot of interest in some of these, the nitty-gritty ones. So are any councils going to utilise crisis and resilience funding to support food partnership development? And another one was, what is actually discussed at food partnership meetings? Is it about reporting what's already happening, or is the goal to create new projects / add-ons to existing partners' work? So often partners might be quite stretched, busy, resistant, already doing a lot. Is this about influencing, or is it about having a space for food partners to work? So actually, what goes on the agenda? So quite nitty gritty. And there is another one which has got less votes, but it was asked more recently, so I don't think it's had the time, and just I think goes in with this like practical group, which is, how is it possible to influence procurement by organisations like care homes and schools where the council doesn't have any direct influence? So a couple of practical ones. Andy, I think you were first to shoot a hand up there, if I go to you.
Yeah, on the what gets discussed, this is not a statutory obligation. You will have your local mandate as a council. Obviously, you'll have your things that you are there to do or not do, and maybe some of what you feel comfortable discussing will be the result of the clarity of the mandate. So councillors in the room give a mandate. If you give a mandate, officers will go out and run with it. We found that to be universally true in Newham, that if you give officers a clear mandate on food and say this matters, then people will put their hand up and say, well, let me do the thing I'm being very clearly asked to do. And there are no rules in the room. It's not statutory. So, for example, we are a series of micro meetings. We don't have all of our partners in the room for the same thing. Food security work happens in a Newham Food Alliance partners meeting, and that covers everything from operational issues with how we're using surplus food to fairly clear policy conversations about what Newham, not the council, but what Newham thinks about, you know, surplus food not being a great way to make a system work. And we do those two things, and we juggle them so that, you know, people are happy that we are working towards something that we all believe in, and that's really, really important. But you know, in a room with head teachers, it's going to be a different thing, isn't it? If you're getting together, maybe using the existing education partnership to come and do work on food, it's a combination of perhaps as a food partnership or the more activist area of the food world, you know, constantly seeking new opportunities and looking to bring them home to Newham. An element of broadcast, an element of listening, isn't it? And there are no rules. What works locally, what you have a mandate to do as an officer, you have the ability to go and do to change the system with that forum. The procurement thing is really, really interesting. Often the gap is not willingness, it's know-how. So a really great example is schools as customers. Just understanding, we're having a big conversation about understanding how much money you actually have or should think you have for food in a complex landscape. So much of the role of somebody, and it's not always designated who, is to go and work that out for everybody. And I talked about making the tea and carrying the bags, and sometimes, as John talked about, being the one that does the dry, boring work in a spreadsheet to then report back to the group. And this is about the synergy that can be provided when one person does the work for everybody. And in some places, you will be very clearly told that is what local government is for. So if you have that mandate, go do it, you know, and then use the meetings as feels right, would be my guidance.
Thank you, Andy. Helen?
Great, yes. Yes, an interesting question. I think I've been involved in so many food partnership meetings now over the years that I think probably you can discuss absolutely anything at any point. And I think that obviously it just depends what's happening in your area and who you've got in the room. And I don't think there's lots of different reasons to organise meetings. You don't have to have, you know, people that are in totally different sectors in the same room. You can have meetings that are specifically about procurement, for example, or specifically about school food, or, you know, specifically a group of food poverty organisations meeting together to discuss things. And I would say that it's less about reporting although you do tend to update each other on what's happening, but it's less about reporting what's happened. It's more about thinking about, like, where are the things that we can do better together? So, like, what's missing? So, for example, I might say, like, if you had some surplus food organisations in the room together, you might be discussing, well, actually, I'm doing that same journey as well as you are on this particular day. So why don't we just one of us do it rather than the two of us and share the load? Or it might be something completely different if you had a load of farmers in the room and you were talking about, actually, how do we get, you know, how can we provide food for a particular contract that might be available? But I think you have to remember, like, you know, if you want to get someone in a room, like, what's in it for them? Because really, like, no one's going to turn up to a meeting that's really boring and they don't see a point in it. So you do have to really talk to your stakeholders about, like, what do they want to change and how do they want to change it, and where are the kind of ways that they align each other to get people talking together. And I think that with the procurement example, how do you influence procurement with other organisations? I know of places that have, like, procurement working groups, so they get different people together that have been working in different institutions procuring, so they can discuss ways that might help them or not. So that's one way that you could sort of influence people outside of your particular remit within the council. When the crisis and resilience funding, I would imagine yes, but I haven't unpicked the new guidelines. So, and I don't know, I know that Isabel's in the room, who probably knows most out of anyone here. So if Isabel, if you've got any thoughts on that, please, can you pop that in the chat?
Thank you, Helen. And yes, if there's people in the audience who are doing or not doing on that, be helpful if you can put that in the chat. I'm afraid I'm not monitoring the chat because I'm monitoring the Q&A, but it'd be good to share thoughts on that. Next, I had John.
So just on the agenda, it's a shame my colleague Karen couldn't make it today, because when we first started the meetings, setting the agendas became a challenge to her, shall we say, because she said to me, I didn't think I was going to have to be a referee, because we had so many different priorities and perspectives from such a varied partnership coming in. And very soon we discovered the value of subgroups, linked to what Andy was saying and Helen, that the fact is people suggest things for the agenda because they really want to focus on the things that are important to them, and that's the reason why they're in the room. So actually we found setting up and doing most of the work in subgroups where people could focus on what they wanted to do really helped. I mean, the example being that, as I said, my background is spatial planning and health, which is to some not the most thrilling of subjects. But when it came to things like writing policies and constitutions, myself and another member of our committee, who's a retired former policy officer within local government as well, and we had a lovely time in our subgroup writing various policies and constitutions, which I'm sure would have bored the rest of the committee to left, and the rest of the committee were very, very thankful for us doing it, and we had to be quite quiet because we were having a ball of a time, really enjoying writing the policies. So it is that fact of subgroups are really important to allow people to focus on what they want to do and then feed back to the main group we've found.
Great, thank you, John. I just say your area of expertise is just incredibly exciting. I can't imagine anyone not being interested. Over to you, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my observations sort of echo everybody else's, and I just wanted to reflect a bit on the post-gold sort of, or the journey to gold over 10 years, because that really gave us something to talk about in meetings, something to focus on, this whole sort of framework that you could hang a lot of work around the city on. And then suddenly, out of the other end, you become a postcard, you become a gold food holder, and actually then in a lot of ways the work begins, because you're not being held quite so tightly by that framework. And I think for us, I think you really need a backbone organisation, whether that's a local authority or a voluntary sector organisation or an external lead. You need some organisation to hold and to learn and to map and to be able to hold the knowledge, really, of the place that you're in. So whilst I think for a lot of ways it doesn't really matter whether you're enabling the voluntary sector to do work and shining a light like Andy is, or a voluntary sector organisation. I think key is that function, and it is carrying the bags. I think, yeah, the subgroups are an obvious way forward, and I think once you start thinking about it as a distributed network rather than a steering group that must meet every month, and it's going to meet for two hours, and if they, and then disappointment happens or disillusionment happens because you start with 10 and then you end up with 2 over and over. Actually, this distributed network idea, which aligns with systems working, actually means that the energy goes where the energy goes and where people want to work. Thanks.
Amazing, thank you. We do need to finish at 3:30, so we are going to be, I'm not going to be able to ask all of the questions, I'm afraid. If there are some very specific ones for speakers, do feel free to type an answer. I know there's one to Sam, one to Andy, I think, about things you specifically did. So that would be helpful, but don't do it yet because I'm going to ask some more questions. I'm going to bundle a few together and to try and get through as many as possible. Cllr has asked 2 important related questions. And the first one's about balance, and it's interesting. You know, everybody's saying, "Oh, agendas can be anything," and we listen to people. But she asks about the role of funding in that making of a decision and choosing of priorities. So food partnerships require a level of investment. Where that investment comes from, that the council, particularly public health, there is an expectation. I think we could make this more general, not just whoever pays for it. Is there an expectation that the partnership aligns with those priorities, particularly if they're council priorities, and how do you manage that balance? And she also asked a related question. It's like, well, okay, so you decide stuff, you do stuff, you bring in the magic of partnership. How do you know you've done it when you get there? So I'd welcome your thoughts on how partnerships demonstrate clear, measurable outcomes, particularly in relation to public health, and how return on investment is evidenced. And there's a couple of related questions about measurement. There's one about, is citizen science a tool? There's another one that asks, how many goals, actions, indicators are partnerships tending to lead at any one time? So we've had balance, measurement, and then I was just going to ask the one that's been asked recently, but has also captured some of that, which sorry, actually it was this one as well. What are your thoughts on councils who are primary? I think we say councils or food partnerships who are primarily focusing on emergency food provision as opposed to building a holistic food partnership. So it's about balance. So obviously we're quite short on time, so you might it'd be helpful if we can have some succinct answers. Andy, you came in first.
Yeah, I just on partnership, you as a council are a partner. So if you go into any partnership without expectations, there's no area of your life where you do that. Of course, as local government, you've defined what you're trying to deliver. Your members have done that at the ballot box. They've then passed that on to you as an officer, and your job is to go out and deliver what they've been elected to deliver through that partnership. If your partnership wants something different from the food system, I don't know, more monoculture, less children fed, as a council, you'd step back. But when does that ever happen? When are we not all, as activists in this area, not looking at change in a very similar way? And somebody asked about how do you measure? It's very hard to measure the partnership as a whole, other than it's a cloud of energy coming towards you. But you can pull out individual things. You can look at metrics such as we've successfully done on school food with the Supervisor School Food Report is a great way to look at that. Or around the Newham food lines, we know that 1 in every 17 community hot meals we deliver leads to a wraparound intervention happening. We can actually measure how many plates served to how many times a resident then goes away from breaking bread to doing something. Now, that's stuff you can pull out, and then you can put all of that together if you need to. But I think a lot of you will find that people start to see you coming. The energy is just obvious, and people then start to really get it.
Great, thank you. John, you were next.
Just on the point about public health funding and public health outcomes being expected, when we first started, wanted to make it about capturing people's views. So we were asked to get involved. Really, the priority was because we wanted to create a healthier food system and promote health. So we took a step back, my team, when we were involved in the start of the partnership, and didn't really feed into the discussions, but more of a facilitator, resulting that health wasn't mentioned at all, and it was identified as a problem. So we had to quickly realise, and hence my balance slide in there, that we had a role to play as a supporter, supporting the setting up of the food partnership, but we were also a champion for health and a stakeholder, as Andy was saying, and it's been taken some time to actually balance those two roles with the fact that we are supporting and have a neutral role to play in supporting the partnership, but we also have a role to play as champions for promoting a healthy food system. And one way we've helped with that is actually helping, supporting and working with other partners to help them see the co-benefits, and also within our own public health team, see the fact that the first step to a more sustainable food system or a healthier food system or a more prosperous food system is actually getting the food system as a whole working together.
Great, thank you, John. And over to you, Helen.
Yes, so there is some really great advice on the Sustainable Food Places website about how to measure your impact. There's a toolkit, a MEL toolkit, that is, we'll share the link for that. The sort of prioritising emergency food is quite an interesting one, because actually I think a lot of sustainable food partnerships were born from local food poverty alliances, because there was a lot of growth that we had at the beginning of COVID. So I don't necessarily think that it's sort of I think it tends to happen that that's where the energy is, and then people are like, well, hang on a second, if we want to change things, we need to change the food system. What else do we need to change? So that can sometimes be the pathway. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that things sort of start from there. And the amount of goals and actions and things like that varies obviously depending on how wide your action plan is, but I certainly know that some of them can contain hundreds of actions and hundreds of partners. So it really just depends on sort of how big your food partnership is and how many stakeholders you've got involved. Yeah, and with the citizens science question, there's been some really interesting projects recently. There's one called Food S Equals, which I will see if I can dig out, that was using citizen researchers to look at they've been working with the local Brighton Food Partnership to do, and in various other places around the country, to do research for them.
Fabulous, thank you so much, and that would be great to get those links. And Sam, over to you. We are quite short on time, so just your final bit would be great. Thank you.
So I just wanted to reflect on being a voluntary sector organisation that is a backbone organisation, which is not the same as a local authority leading on this sort of partnership work. And it ties into the funding, particularly because to be able to do this type of partnership, backbone work, convening, hosting, mapping, those types of work, you do need a level of funding. And there's very little funding out there to do that type of partnership work. So as a voluntary sector organisation, we've spent a lot of time delivering projects, which keeps it all sort of the shipper sort of together. In the early days, there was Sustainable Food Places funding for coordinators. And I think that if any local authorities listening and they want to fund your local voluntary sector organisations to do partnership working, that would be a fantastic thing to start doing. Doesn't need much, but it just needs some focused energy. And in terms of the framework of measurable outcomes, I think you can use the SFP framework for the awards to write your action plans with deliverable actions and targets. Thanks, Emily.
Amazing, thank you so much, Sam. And I think that's a great set of questions to be ending on. I'm so sorry to the people whose questions we weren't able to put to the panel. So it was such a big turnout and so many great questions. I'm really sorry for those we didn't get to, but do feel free to tap away while I'm to any last questions, panelists. So we're about to close. Just to say, I think we've had a fabulous journey there. Really loads of useful information, and thank you to everyone who's participated as well. Some really great chat, really great questions, and you shared some fantastic useful information as well. The slides are going to be shared tomorrow. If you would like to get a copy of the recording, then please, you need to email Emily Hackett, and she's about to put her email in the chat, I believe, as if by magic. So or just reply to the email. If you're watching this and you can't see the chat, please do just reply to the organizer's email. It's emily.hackett, HACKETT at it's flipped away. I think it's low. Sorry, hang on, I've lost the chat. Do you know, I'm not even going to read it out. Reply to the email that you had that invited you to the meeting, basically, and you can get the recording. It's possible it might also be hosted, in which case that information will be sent around tomorrow. I'd just like to say thanks to everyone for participating. Our fabulous panel, amazing input. And sorry, Helen, did you want to just say something there as well?
Only just that we've got a feedback form. I'll pop it again in the chat. So if you've got any suggestions for any other things that you want us to do webinars about, or any information that you need, or any feedback at all, please fill that in.
Fabulous. Yeah, so do fill in the feedback form, and maybe we'll send that around as well, hopefully from the LGA, if I'm sure other Emily will be happy to do that. So thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you leave as inspired as I feel following this. All right, thanks again everyone. Bye.